Hello everyone, my name is Brad and welcome to the online learning channel. Today I'm going to be assisting you with English, specifically focusing on the grade 12 curriculum. And when it comes to the grade 12 curriculum, like of course all other grades, English is comprised of a number of different aspects. And for today's purposes, the aspect that we're going to be focusing on is the idea of writing and presenting. Okay, so when it comes to writing and presenting, this is going to be the focus for today. And what I have for you is a slideshow that I'd like to share with you that just assists us in covering a number of topics that refer to presenting and writing when it comes to not only preparing for dialogue or interview or any other aspect of writing and presenting, but it just gives us some examples to work with that will aid us along the way. All right, so without further ado, let us begin. So welcome to today's lesson that is going to be focusing on writing and presenting. All right, so as just mentioned, the focus and objective for today will be writing and presenting. And for today's purposes, we're going to be covering three aspects when it comes to writing and presenting. That is the idea of writing a dialogue, writing an interview, and then lastly, writing a speech. And more importantly, of course, how it is that one goes about not only planning and constructing ideas, but of course, presenting the final product. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to be focusing on writing a dialogue. So in many respects, a dialogue can take the shape of informal or formal, say, discussion. But for today's purposes, we're going to be focusing on an informal discussion. In this case, the example we're going to be making use of is an argument between two friends. Okay, so it's important to bear in mind when writing a dialogue that we need to have a topic in mind. So in this particular case, I've used an example where a close friend has, hypothetically speaking, upset you in some kind of way or the other. We all have friends, we all have close acquaintances that we interact with, not necessarily on a daily basis, but on a regular basis. And from time to time, we do find ourselves disagreeing with one another on whatever topic it may be. So when it comes to writing out this particular dialogue, my suggestion is that you write out a dialogue between these two friends in which an argument takes place where you discuss how it is that he or she has committed an act or two that has essentially upset you at the end of the day. Okay, so when it comes to writing a dialogue, like I mentioned earlier, it's important to establish a topic. So in this case, we have established the topic that there's an argument happening between two friends. And this is an example of that exact dialogue taking place. So this is essentially the planning phase. This is what you would now note down in terms of just piecing together your ideas and your thoughts as to how exactly this argument is taking place. So we have two candidates that we are now dealing with, one by the name of Mpho and one by the name of Andile. So as to whether you represent Mpho or Andile, that's up to you at the end of the day. But in this particular case, one would essentially think that you would be representing Mpho, because Mpho in this particular context is the one that is upset due to the fact that Andile has now copied her homework or your homework without receiving any kind of permission or go ahead. Okay, so as the title suggests, this is an argument between two friends, Mpho and Andile. And on the left-hand column, we see the actual names. And on the right-hand column, we see what exactly is taking place. So Mpho is clearly upset. Maths homework was copied by Andile. And more importantly, Andile did not ask permission. Andile then responds with the notion of, it's not so bad, I would have done the same for you. Okay, so just trying to, water down the severity of the situation. Mpho feels that her privacy has been, say, taken away from her, and no permission was given in order for this information to be distributed. Andile is now feeling a little bit, say, remorseful, is now apologizing and asking for forgiveness. Mpho then agrees to forgive, but of course with the condition that next time, if this situation does arise, once again, please do ask permission. Then Andile agrees, comes to one's senses, and accepts the fact that it was wrong for him to copy the homework, and if it does, of course, happen to be the case that this takes place again in the future, he will then ask for permission before doing so. Okay, so between these two friends, one needs to write out the actual dialogue between the two of them, just gain a sense as to what kind of interaction has taken place. And then what one would do is typically write down a draft version of the dialogue. So you can just not worry about really having to present the final and squeaky clean product at the end of the day, first and foremost, if that makes sense. It's more so a case of just giving yourself some time to piece down your thoughts, make potential errors every now and then. The good news is, of course, if those errors do take place, such as grammar or punctuation errors, you can come back to it later and then rectify whatever it is that you have written down in your first draft. So the purpose of writing a first draft is to piece together your ideas that have now been formulated in the plan. It is then, of course, expected that you edit the draft eventually. You correct any kind of grammar or punctuation errors, and then, of course, if there are any spelling or format errors that may be apparent within your dialogue, you also, of course, rectify those as needs be. And then, of course, finally, you write the actual draft out in its entirety, the final product, if you will, or the final text, as the slide suggests. And this, of course, will be the version that you present to the examiner before it is marked at the end of the day. Okay, so when it comes to writing this particular dialogue, this is the final, say, product, if you will. And this is just my take on how it is one can elaborate on the discussions taking place between Mpho and Andile. Okay, so first and foremost, we have the candidates on the left-hand column and the responses on the right-hand side. So Mpho starts off the dialogue as follows. Andile, I am so cross with you. Okay, so there's a kind of determined nature within Mpho to make this message clear to Andile. You took my maths book out of my bag and copied today's homework. I wouldn't have minded if you didn't ask me. Okay, so clearly upset about the fact that Andile has now taken the homework out of Mpho's bag. Andile is now clearly anxious, as we can see, indicated in the brackets, but I didn't do anything bad. You would have let me if I'd asked you. You know how badly I'm doing in maths lately. Okay, so Andile clearly feeling a little bit pressurized in terms of producing adequate work, and just felt that to eliminate any kind of threat, he would just go straight into it and copy the homework at the end of the day. So Mpho is clearly upset, shaking her head. I hate to tell you this, but that's not going to do it. That's nothing to do with it, rather. Of course, I would have lent you my book, but you didn't respect my privacy, or you didn't ask permission either. Okay, so privacy in the sense that the bag was now infiltrated, and then secondly, without asking permission, of course. Andile is clearly apologetic. I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking properly. I took it for granted. Okay, again, the notion of a pleading-like demeanor being evident by way of the brackets. Will you forgive me? Okay, that's the question that now Andile is posing to Mpho. Mpho, thinking, puts her hand on her shoulder. Hey, you know what? At the end of the day, it's all right. I just had to get it off my chest. But next time, please ask me for permission. Andile, clearly remorseful, as mentioned earlier in the planning section, is now in agreement. Maybe I should be asking you for help with my homework rather than just copying yours. Okay, so they've both reached an agreement. They're both under the impression that it was a mistake, and life can go on. All right, so moving on to the next form of writing and presenting. In this particular case, we are writing an interview. Okay, so an interview is typically a formal meeting where someone is asked a series of questions. Okay, so typically when it comes to most interviews, one uh, one immediately thinks of a job interview, and that's almost 100% of the time the kind of example most people make use of when it comes to writing an interview. So in this particular case, it can either be a job interview, or it could of course be a TV or radio interview. Let's also bear that in mind. But for today's purposes, we're going to be focusing on a job interview. So now when it comes to writing an interview, a written interview in the exam usually makes use of formal language, and I would strongly suggest that this be the case. Avoid using any kind of slang and contractions. You don't want to be bringing across any kind of informal language. It's written in the format of a dialogue as a record of the actual words said by people in the interview itself. Okay, so the purpose is to record exactly what each person said as accurately as possible, so that the interviewer can then, of course, refer back to their notes once the interview has taken place, and they can make up their mind as to who the best candidate may be. Remember to put the speaker's name with a colon in front of it at the beginning of each new piece of dialogue, so as to indicate to the examiner that you are now representing this particular speaker when writing the text. Okay, so remember, interviews are written in a dialogue format. They use a new line each time a new speaker speaks. Okay, that's important to note. And the use of formal, register, and formal language in an interview is paramount, or is very important. Okay, so now when writing an interview, you need to choose the text type and you need to choose a topic. Okay, so you need to formulate your thoughts, bring together your ideas, and essentially decide on what type of topic you're going to be focusing on. So I've provided a topic for you guys just to give you some ideas as to what exactly this interview is going to be referring to. So this particular topic goes as follows. Your local municipality needs male and female administrative assistants. You've applied for one of these positions. The municipal manager has invited you to an interview. You are then to write out the interview that takes place between the two of you. Okay, so you as the interviewee and the municipal manager are now engaging in dialogue with one another. So first and foremost, you need to plan the text, much like the case in the first section that dealt with dialogue. Plan the actual text, and when you plan the text, you need to read through the types of questions that the interviewer is going to be asking the interviewee carefully. So identify the key words that need to be made use of in your planning. So in this case, administrative assistant, that's what you're applying for. Municipal manager, that's the person who's interviewing you, and the interview itself. So a nice tip to make use of when writing an interview is to piece together your thoughts via a mind map so that you can plan the interview accordingly. So I've shared with you guys an example of a mind map that I typically would have pieced together when planning this particular interview. And as you can see, in the center of the image, we have the topic. So it's a job interview with the municipal manager, and the text type is taking the form of an interview itself. And then I've got several points that I've made mention of that just focus on what kind of steps I will be taking in piecing together this interview. So first and foremost, the introduction. So introduce yourself and welcome, and you are welcomed by the manager. The manager then thanks you for coming in. Second point, the manager is going to be asking you about qualifications, any kind of courses you've done, to which then you would reply. The manager then refers to your best qualities, what is essentially your strengths, then you reply. What then follows is any kind of work experience, the manager asking you about work experience, the number of working hours that you'd be potentially willing to work, and then the manager thanks you and informs you as to whether your job application will be in fact successful in the week to follow. Okay, so you are to write and edit a draft text, use the ideas from the plan, edit the draft by correcting any kind of grammar, punctuation, spelling, and format errors, and then of course you put together the interview itself. Okay, so here's my take on the interview. So remember, it's an interview with a municipal manager. The manager, I've decided to not give the manager a name, just giving him a title. And in this particular case, the interviewee is Mr. Dlamini. So the manager, welcome, Mr. Dlamini. Thank you for coming to the job interview. Mr. Dlamini, thank you for the opportunity. Firstly, I'm interested in your qualifications for this job. Mr. Dlamini replies, I studied for a BCom degree at the University of Johannesburg. The manager then continues to ask, do you have any other degrees or certificates? Mr. Dlamini replies, yes, I completed a course in Microsoft Office Suite. The manager then responds by asking, what would you say are your best qualities? Mr. Dlamini gives a nice, straightforward and honest answer. I'm a very passionate and hardworking individual. I'm reliable, trustworthy, and I'm always keen to learn. Definitely something that an interviewer would like to hear. So the manager then asks, do you have any work experience? Mr. Dlamini replies, yes, I did a 6-month internship in administration at a local business. Mr. Dlamini is then asked, are you able to work any kind of flexible hours? To which Mr. Dlamini replies, yes. The manager then thanks Mr. Dlamini for his time. We'll contact you next week and let you know whether your application has been successful. Mr. Dlamini then responds by thanking the interviewer. In this case, thanking him for his time and his effort and his willingness to interview Mr. Dlamini. All right, so we're moving on then to the third, the third aspect of our topic for today, and that is the notion of writing a speech. Okay, so a speech typically takes the form of a formal talk given either to a group of people in most cases, or it could be a one-on-one, but in most cases it is a formal talk that is given to a group of people, and it obviously concerns a particular topic. So naturally, when one gives a speech, you need to come up with a topic that you would like to present on. All right, so when it comes to writing a speech, a couple of points to bear in mind. So a speech uses formal language. The register of the language is formal yet friendly, all right, just to kind of take the edge off, or the kind of seriousness of the actual speech itself. The tone of the speech should often be polite and sincere, so as to bring across a sense of authenticity. In the introduction of the speech should acknowledge individuals or groups of people in the audience. Remember, most speeches are divided into introductions, bodies, and conclusions. The body of the speech then should keep to the topic as much as possible, and then eventually the conclusion should thank the audience for their attention. Okay, so that's just a general approach one can take when, say, constructing their speech and looking at developing the dialogue or developing the text in a kind of systematic and straightforward fashion. All right, so when it comes to speeches, you need to think carefully about the purpose of the speech as well as the audience when writing your speech. It's a very important aspect to bear in mind when one presents a speech as to who your audience is, because it always will give the speaker a sense as to how to approach their speech, not only in terms of the diction and the tone, but also just the very nature of the speech itself. Is it going to appeal to my audience, or is it going to, fall on deaf ears, so to speak? So also make sure that your speech keeps to the topic. It's not advisable for any kind of speech to veer off topic in whatever capacity it may be. Always stick to the topic as best as possible. Okay, so when writing a speech, you need to choose the text type, and you need to essentially establish what kind of question you'll be addressing. In this particular case, I've made use of an example where you've been selected as a student to deliver a farewell speech on behalf of the grade 12 students at your final school assembly. Okay, so in this particular case, you may be the head boy or head girl, and this is your final school assembly, and you have now been tasked with not the job, but just the kind of task, I would say more so, to address the audience in a way that would suggest that this is the final time we will all gather together and bid each other farewell. All right, so when it comes to planning the actual text, you need to bear in mind a couple of key words, things like farewell, the speech itself, and the fact that it is a final school assembly. So in this particular case, you are well aware as to who your audience is. Obviously, first and foremost, your fellow peers, the students, Then, of course, the staff members of this particular school would obviously be present together with the headmaster or headmistress. And then, of course, the parents of the students themselves. Again, like mentioned earlier with regards to the interview, when it comes to piecing together your ideas and the format of your speech, it's often a good idea to put together a mind map just to jot down your thoughts. As soon as they come to you, just jot them down in chronological order. You can make use of mind maps in whatever way or fashion that suits you. This is just an example of a couple of speech bubbles that have been put together that will just serve as a kind of reference point when it comes to writing your speech. Okay, so when it comes to writing this particular speech, what I've done is I've divided it into a series of paragraphs, and you'll notice that the first paragraph includes the conclusion, and the last paragraph makes mention of the first paragraph, excuse me, makes mention of an introduction, and the last paragraph makes mention of a conclusion. So in this particular case, the introduction goes as follows. One is to greet the principal guests, the teachers, parents, and of course the grade 12s themselves. Paragraph 2, offer congrats to the grade 12s. They've achieved a significant goal of theirs many years ago. This journey began. This is now the end of the journey. When it comes to the third paragraph, the school itself, it's been our home for 5 years. Huge compliment to all of us. When it comes to the next paragraph, thanks everyone, not only the principal and the grade 12s, but the teachers themselves. Thank you to the parents. Thank you to the fellow matrics for sharing not only all your pains, but of course your successes as well. Then the fifth paragraph would make mention of any kind of advice, such as, shoot for the moon and land among the stars, some kind of quirky phrase that just gets the audience's attention. And then the last paragraph or the conclusion, thank you and good luck to all. So this is just a pre-planning phase that will essentially give you some food for thought before you flesh out your actual speech. So you are to write and edit a draft text, use the ideas from the plan by way of your mind map, edit the draft by correcting any kind of grammar, punctuation, spelling, and format errors. And then, of course, you are well on your way to producing the final product. Okay, so speaking of final product, this is what I have to share with you guys in terms of how it is that I would envision this particular student presenting their final speech at, of course, their inaugural final assembly. The principal, Mr. Duminy, honored guests, teachers, parents, and most importantly, the grade 12s of 2013. Huge congratulations to the class of 2013. After a journey of so many years, we have achieved our stunning goal. This wonderful school has been our home for 5 years. I was talking to Mr. Duminy earlier, and he said that this matric group is one of the best classes in many years. We are a credit to ourselves and our families. With gratitude in my heart, I sincerely thank the principal and the grade 12 teachers. I also thank our parents and my fellow students. We shared one another's pains and successes. Here's one piece of advice. Shoot for the stars. There, your dreams will take you to a very special place where you can be the person you want to be. Thank you and good luck, everyone. All right, so a speech, one must remember, is often an opportunity to thank and or, of course, inspire people, depending on the actual occasion itself. And it's a good opportunity for you to show this in your choice of language when it comes to constructing the speech itself. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on writing and presenting, specifically focusing on writing a dialogue, writing an actual interview, and then, of course, last but not least, writing a speech. I trust that you've learned a great deal when it comes to not only planning these particular written texts, but also, of course, piecing together ideas in order to produce the final product. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.